Seen the little video on River City. It's available on YouTube. It's quite impressive to see how that whole development came together. And since 2013, the company's been expanding to Winnipeg, to Saskatoon, to Edmonton, and indeed to Halifax, so that they're now pan-Canadian. Urban Capital's work has pioneered and pushed the envelope in terms of urban location, high-end yet functional design, and green living. And the firm continues to contribute to the DNA of cities across Canada with new markets, new architectural approaches, new interior features and layouts, and new environmental measures. David was raised, not born here in Canada, born in Montreal, but raised here in Ottawa. Sorry, not born here in Ottawa. Born in Montreal, but raised here in Ottawa. And indeed, his folks and family still live here. So projects in his, what I was calling his hometown, include the Mondrian, which our beloved Professor Kariuk lives in, the East Market, which our former director Jill Stoner lived in, and the Central Development, including a number of others. I think you're currently working on yet another project here in Ottawa. So, yeah, David's firm has been very active here, and it's important just to understand, I guess, to be able to tie the various projects that you see as you walk around to the various companies and individuals that make them happen. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome David Wex back home to Ottawa and to invite him to the podium to tell us a little bit about Urban Capital. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ben. I didn't time how long my presentation was, so this will keep me going. I should also say that we didn't develop in Edmonton. I hit a impermeable wall in moving to Alberta, and we made 0 sales at the launch of our project there. So right now, I can't say that we're totally pan-Canadian, but we're almost there. I also haven't figured out how we'll make Vancouver work. But I'm going to talk to you about our work, which stretches from Halifax to the prairies. Over the last 20 years, I feel, as Ben was saying, that the last 20 years were the perfect time to be in, maybe hopefully continue to be the perfect time to be in real estate development, because things have been moving super fast. This is River City. I think many of you will know this project because it's won quite a lot of awards and has been a project in multi-residential development that has propelled design forward in the city, in the country to a large degree. I'm going to talk about a few things. First, I do give lectures at architecture schools, and I often talk about condominium development, so I thought I'd take you quickly through some random thoughts on condominium development. I think architects appreciate knowing what the other side, the evil side, does. Then it's not going to be a super brief history of urban capital, as it turns out. How Canada cities have changed in the past 20 plus years, that'll be totally from my personal experience. I do not profess to have any academic credentials to tell you how that is, and how I believe our buildings engage and contribute. So first, random thoughts on condominium development. So it's really part art and part science. It involves, I'm going to actually sit over here so I can read this.
I'm going to move the mouse out of the screen too.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool, okay. It involves, in no particular order, business sense, design sensibility, creativity, ability to read legal documents, sometimes knowing the right people, understanding construction, and caring about your customer. And many developers, who I always say suffer from developer ADHD, don't really get the caring about your customer at the end of the project. They want to move on to the next deal. But it's all of those things. It also requires luck and perseverance. It combines personal profit with public responsibility, and very important, I'll come back to this, I have a rule. I really believe it should make at least everyone at least 80% happy. And what I mean by that is, as a developer, you touch many, many people. Obviously you impact your purchasers, they're the primary people you affect. You have partners and investors, they want to make money. You have you guys, architects, who want to see your vision translated into reality in the best way possible. It involves city staff who approve it. Everyone needs to be at least 80% happy. No one should be more than 80% happy, because if you're more than 80% happy, I guarantee you one other group will be 20% happy. So I'll come back to that. A brief history of urban capital. So we are a Toronto-based condominium developer. For this little talk, I had my creative guy count up done, we seem to have gone from the number I stated to 15,000. That's mostly because of one big project in Mississauga. But that's what we have built or under development in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Winnipeg, Halifax, Saskatoon, and Mississauga. 3 points that I think define us. First, urban pioneering, and I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. I really believe we're a pioneer in cities. Next, this is interesting. We have a clear and clean design aesthetic. I have this theory about architecture as product. We can develop. We're not a big company. We develop in multiple markets because what we offer is a product. There's a book about what it is. There's a spec sheet, and it's the same whether we're building in downtown Toronto or Saskatoon or Montreal or Halifax. It's the same product. So you know what you're getting with our project. I think that's something that distinguishes us from the.
We're streaming on YouTube, and if you don't speak into the mic, they can't hear you on YouTube.
All right. Okay. So
You can turn this around a little bit.
I will turn that around. Cool. The last thing, which I won't get into too much, is I believe we have a strong brand and identity. So, first thing, I'm going to take you through, and you'll see, this is kind of cool, the little bar charts on the right tell you how we're doing in terms of units and total value. This is just really a fun thing for me. First project I'm talking about quickly, Camden Lofts. This is what started it all. This project was seminal. It was done in the King Spadina district of Toronto. Many of you might know about this. Back in the 90s, there was nothing going on in Toronto, but there was certainly nothing going on in the 2 wings of downtown Toronto, which were called King Spadina and King Parliament. It was dead, former industrial areas. The city, Barbara Hall, the mayor at the time, opened up those areas to development. This project was actually done before that happened, but in anticipation of it happening. And this is a new building, but it took us 2 years to sell 40 condos at $190 a foot. Yeah, 1996. So depths of the recession, but this is what started it, and there were really, those of you who know Toronto, King Spadina now is obviously one of the most sought after areas, but it was derelict and no one could find the place. So that's what started it. Then we did a little project called Charlotte on the other side of Spadina. Right now, the people after us built 40-story or 50-story towers. We were meek enough to follow the city guidelines and build what was in the... This project you might recognize. It's on the east end of the market and suitably called East Market. One thing we love is names that are double-barreled and follow something about the location. So East Market started that. This was crazy. We went from 40 and 50 unit buildings to 420. I happened to go to high school with the daughter of the owner of the land, which is why we were able to tie it up for, I think, $500 for a year before we could get our act together. But this changed everything for us. We went from small to relatively large, and in Ottawa too. It was the first building in Ottawa. It introduced our aesthetic, urban living, small 500 square foot units that never happened in the city before. We went to Montreal. This was the most fun part of our existence. We actually had a project in Montreal which made us super cool. It was difficult. It had a lot of construction issues, but this was in the cité, the multimedia city of this multimedia city area. Again, we introduced residential usage into an area that didn't have it before. Then we went back to Toronto and did a tower. Everyone in Toronto needs to do a tower. This was back in, I think, 2008, 2009. This project you will recognize as well, Mondrian. It's called Mondrian because they're red pieces of glass after Piet Mondrian, probably. But what was interesting about this project is it was really introducing residential use in the deep downtown, the deep financial district, you would call financial city center. And it broke a lot of molds. Again, what was interesting about this is that the landowner wanted to build an above-grade parking garage. So the only way it happened is we built it, but I think we did a really wonderful job cladding it. And so the vendor kept the ground floor, which became a Shoppers Drug Mart, and the multi-story above-grade parking garage, and then we built our condos on top of it. So another interesting model. This is interesting. We went back to Toronto and we built, this is the first townhouse project that of more than 2 or 3 townhouses that wasn't faux Victorian or faux Georgian. And it, again, was a precedent because after this is near Trinity Bellwoods in Toronto, after this, people felt that they would be able to sell a grade-related townhouse project that didn't look like it was out of, Kensington in London, not Kensington in Toronto. So I think this made a big impact as well. Then we did another tower in Toronto. And then we'll get into the stage where I think we really blossomed because we won against a lot of odds the opportunity to develop the River City, what we called the River City. It was called something else by the, back to the double-barreled names. And we use city a lot. I use city a lot because it pulls up by the bootstraps what we're selling. It makes us look sophisticated and big, when in fact it's raw, empty, industrial, post-industrial land. We won this from Waterfront Toronto and won the opportunity to build this, and it was in large part because we brought in Saucier Perrot out of Montreal, who had never done multi-res, but were definitely a top echelon design firm in the country. I'm sure you know their work. This was the first phase. This was the second phase, and these were difficult buildings to build, and I will tell you I'm still dealing with them because they are built with totally non-standard residential details, and to get out from our warranty obligations requires us to put some standard details in after the fact. But obviously these buildings, as I said before, set a standard in Toronto and I think took residential architecture in the city to another level. This is the Central project. I love this project. Michael will speak next, and he's from Copenhagen, but this is like my ode to Copenhagen. It's like a building that is, I think, 8 or 9 stories tall. It's got 550 units in it. It's a big development, but it's very understated, and it creates a street definition, a street wall really well. And this was a really troublesome part of the city. I mean, I got in trouble for saying this at the time, but there was, this is on Bank Street between Centertown and the Glebe, and it was a bit of a dead zone, and I called it a dead zone, and there was a huge protest. I was glitter bombed. I don't know if people remember this. It was pretty awesome. The best part of it was my parents were watching the news that night, and I hadn't told them that we came to Ottawa for this event, and they saw it on the news, and it was pretty funny. But this project, again, I think established a certain architectural language in the city that I think, and it's unassuming, and you'll see we'll come back to mid-rise a little later, and I'll talk a little bit about mid-rise. This is a great building. This is our building in Halifax, a very small building. I've been trying to get into the Halifax market for a while, called Southport. It was quite close to it's really next to the port, and those are not containers, obviously, but we really had to get the trade to match. We did a study of all the colors in the port of the shipping containers, and I think we did very, very, very successful. We were very successful in creating a little building. It also, when we launched this project, 72 units, not big, our broker told us we would sell no more than 5 on the launch weekend. No more than 5. It had never been done in Halifax, had never had a pre-sale, anything like that. We sold 72. It was awesome. We also, the night before, there was one penthouse that I had for $500,000. Based on her advice, we dropped it to $350,000. The first woman who walked in said, "I want that penthouse." And I said, "How much is it?" I said $350,000. She said, "I would have paid $500,000 for it." So this is a sad story. This is the opposite end of success. This is a project we did in Winnipeg. We did it with the Germain Group as part of a redevelopment of the downtown in an area that was downtown but also on the wrong side of Portage. And it was part of the city's plan to rejuvenate that part of the city. And it's been a disaster. I mean, the pandemic hasn't helped, but we will be owning units in this building, and it will be a financial loss for us until I hand our company over to the next person who wants it. It shows you that, redevelopment buildings and multi-use, whatever, good intention, good design, cannot in and of itself solve deep-seated dystopia, which is what that part of the city is. Because it looks great, but we can't we can't sell units for love or money. And we kept building it because we went ahead and built it because people said, when you build it, they will come. Not always the case. This is a tower in Toronto. This is a very interesting tower. And Ben, how am I doing for time?
I haven't been keeping track of it.
Okay. This full of anecdotes. This is a building that is basically what's it called? It's basically post-tension construction, which we don't do in Toronto or in Canada very well. I will speak just for Toronto. This is a 30-story building on top of a podium that is a post-tension, 2-meter post-tension slab with an art piece going through it. I'll come back to that. But the interesting thing is when we went to tighten the slab, instead of the slab coming back up, it crumbled. So it was the biggest insurance claim under a DE5 insurance policy, which no longer exists, I think ever. But they didn't pour the slab properly. They didn't, and we had video of them smoking and talking while the arm was. Anyway, we had to take that slab apart. Well, we didn't have to take that slab apart. We introduced a new structure right from the footings 5 floors down and basically rebuilt it. No one knew, but one option was to take it down, which would have involved 6 months to a year of dump trucks at our site taking it apart. So it's not all fun and games always. But this project has an art piece that pierces the podium. You can see it there in green. It's pretty striking. Then the last market that we have successfully brought our product to is Saskatoon. This is one of our most successful products. And going back to talking to you about architecture as product, what I find amusing about this project is that Saskatoon is not a particularly out there design city. It's a great little city, but it's not out there in terms of design. But every one of the lawyers and brokers and conservative senators who live in that building live in a building with concrete ceilings and full floor-to-ceiling glass walls and sliding doors like all of our projects. And even if I remember they asked if we did coffered ceilings and stuff like that, the answer was no. So there's a certain amount of, it was like, I guess like a Seinfeld episode. This is a project we did back in Toronto, Smart House. It was micro condos. It became very talked about, very controversial, because the average unit size was 300 square feet. But you could live in downtown Toronto at Queen and Spadina for $270,000 because the unit was 200 square feet. And we had all kinds of furniture and stuff like that. It was a big success. Michael Peter did that building, just FYI. This is probably our most famous building, River City Phase 3. It's certainly the one that's most out there. It's the 3rd phase of our River City development. Again, quite recognizable and complicated from a structural point of view, but a success. This is another Peter building. This is a building in Halifax. I love this building. It's just very elegant and subtle and a real success. I think a beautiful building that we did. It's our 2nd building in Halifax. This is the 4th and final phase of River City called Harris Square, and I'll come back and talk a little about this later, but this is a building totally reflects the site, the 5-sided site, by having undulating groups of floors that move back and forth in 5 sides. This is I'm going to come back to these briefly in a little bit, but this is not necessarily a building that screams adventurous architecture, but is a background building that we did on the Queensway in Toronto. That is Toronto's inner suburbs. I'm not sure what it would be like here, but it's the next generation of development. I'll talk a little about this in a second. We have buildings like this coming up, a lot of them. They're what I think are going to be part of the solution to our housing crisis, which is mid-rise on arterial roads, not necessarily in the sexiest parts of the city, but the people who live in the neighborhoods right now love this product because they have an ability to move when they retire, or their kids. People come in and buy 1 or 2 for their kids and 1 for themselves. So that's Queensway Park. This is another inner suburb building we just completed on the Humber River. This was, there was two parts of this, a big stacked townhouse development and a tower, so also very successful. This is one of, I should mention in reference to Neuf not having done this building, Neuf did this building, and also our other Montreal one. My friend Azad Chishmanyan is actually on his way back from Lisbon, so is not here, because you can't fly from Lisbon to Ottawa, apparently. This is a development in Ville Saint-Laurent, which is interestingly the most multi-ethnic district in all of Canada. It's 1,000 units made up of 4 mid-rise buildings of about 200 units each and 72 townhouses. It's half built. We just finished the second phase. And I'm going to talk about this later about attempt with creating new communities to create an area of vibrancy, because it's a challenge. This is our M-City project. This is what takes us from, being kind of like a mid-sized developer to huge. This is like 10,000 units, this project. We're working on it with the Rogers family. This is an 80-story first phase building that's going to occupy later this year. Going from the extreme to the extreme, this is our third building in Halifax, 70 units, which is now under construction. So as you can see, we build on all scales. This is our next building in Ottawa, James House, at the corner of James and Bank. And as you can see, it's a progression of Central, but in the same family, but I think a bit of an advance. This is, I was talking about Queensway Park. This is a few blocks away from Queensway Park. It's our second Queensway project called Reina. Interesting, this has received world attention because this is the project, I don't know if some of you have seen about this, that is run by only women. It's run by our Director of Development, Taya Cook. Only women consultants, only women construction managers, wherever possible women trades. It's completely run by women. I was a bit like Charlie in this. I think no one gets that joke, or it's not funny. But it's also another example of a mid-rise building on an arterial road, not in the sexiest neighborhood, that I believe is the bit of the future for development in Canada. This is M-City 2, another 800 units. This is what M-City will look like when completed. It's surrounded by single-family homes, which is something unique to Canada, I think. This is the third phase of City Midtown that's coming up next. We're now in, as you can see, most of our growth is happening in M-City, but this is coming up next. So that's a little romp quickly through our inventory of projects. How Canadian cities have changed from my point of view in the past 20 years. So what's clear is Canadian cities are transforming. There's a lot of countries, a lot of places in the world where cities don't transform or go through periods. It's for sure 100% happening here. Why is that? Well, obvious reason, massive immigration. Most of our projects, like our Montreal project has, the 500 units we sold has three or four English-sounding names, 5 or 6 Quebecois names, and 492 other names. So immigration leading to population growth, leading to physical change in our cities. What's interesting is that physical change has been in the context of certain elements, certain thought processes or policies or ways of thinking. First of all, general awareness of the cost of urban sprawl. When we grew in the 80s, we didn't have that. We grew out. Now, I'm not saying it's foolproof, but at least we understand it. A challenge to the primacy of car and traffic engineers. Like, we have a place in Montreal, in our project in Montreal, and you go to Griffintown, an area, I'm sure many of you know it. The right-of-way is 50 to 60% pedestrian and bike, only 40%. That's a sea change. That would never have happened 20 years ago. And the value given to good design, both public and private. People complain all the time, but the fact is that design is better now than it was 20 years ago. And so this big boom has given us lots of good stuff as well as lots of mediocre stuff. So in the 1990s to 2010s, I believe what the goal was to, what I call residentialize our urban cores. It was all about the urban cores, get people to move downtown, stop urban sprawl. These are all buildings, I won't go through them again, that were the first in their market in doing that, in whatever market we're talking about. 2020s, I think it's a little different. I really feel that we've done that. Every developer is downtown. It's no big deal to be downtown. You're not taking any risk to be downtown. What's happening now is the inner suburbs, I believe, are starting to see the development. We've been committed to we're basically buying in Toronto and Montreal inner suburb sites, big sites to make an impact. And also focus on non-car transportation options, you know, whether it's Bixby or whatever. I bike to work, but it's amazing how you can just go up the street now where we live and get a bike and just drop it off. In fact, it's impossible to find a bike because it's all used if you go after 8:30. And the ones downtown are all filled up. You can't find a place to park it. These buildings are all examples of what's coming in the future, what we'll be focused on. I won't get into this. Of course, it's all up in the air because who knows with the pandemic. I personally think that we'll get back to it. It just will be a 5-year lag to where we were. Listen, I think cities, no one should bet against cities. But there's obviously going to be a hiccup. How buildings engage and contribute. First, make a market, catalyze an urban redevelopment. This is ad nauseum, you've seen this now, but I feel that we've done this. We've created markets in our, buildings have created markets and shown the way to go forward. Design, I think we have a unique and established design credo. These are, I won't take you through, but I will tell you that in the top middle one, that is the portico or the canopy outside a townhouse at River City. It cost $70,000. It made it into the plans without any discussion. I once went on site and saw it arrive and asked our contractor how much there were. There's like 20 of them. So anyway, so at least I get the benefit of showing that in our the one on the, just the one on the left is from our Halifax project, Gorswick Park. You see through the park. There's little moves, from big moves to little moves. This is our interiors. No matter where they are, our interiors look like this. And that was, I was saying before, we have a product, and that is what we deliver. Support the streetscape and community. So listen, making new buildings and public spaces is beautiful. It's not hard. I mean, it takes talent, but it's not that hard. Making them vibrant is hard. New buildings, new communities are hard. So 2 case studies. This is River City. I will tell you that we have had a huge success and are very well known for this project. The street life is dead. It's totally dead. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I can talk about them later, but I'll come back to what we're trying to do about it. This is City Midtown, the Montreal project. And we've created a central zone with every amenity conceivable. But there are 500 people living there, and I'm not sure how successful it'll be. So both of these are new created communities, very difficult to create vibrancy. New buildings require tenants with good covenants who will pay high rents. That's the truth when it comes down to it. So you're going to get a bank or a Shoppers Drug Mart or something like that. You might get a great food store. But you're not going to get the cool person who's opening up a very super cool club. Or not club, but cafe or bistro, which I'll come to next. It takes, to do that, you need to have an enlightened group of investors and well, not bankers, but partners and investors who will agree, say, hey, we're good with not making the last dollar, and we're good with having a submarket to create some sense of vibrancy. So this is a pitch for our next business line. A friend and I are opening a line of cafe bars in our buildings called Lisbon Hotel. It's neither Portuguese nor a hotel. Kind of a riff off of a Wes Anderson movie. But the idea behind this is that there's value. There's value to doing this. If you have more units to sell, for sure, it'll help sell them. But even if it doesn't, part of creating these communities is trying to create something that is above and beyond just bricks and mortar. And this is our attempt to do it. So create an urban feel and an experience where one doesn't exist. And what you need is enlightened ownership and investors who buy into the 80% rule, or otherwise see a value in leasing something at submarket. You want to have someone who you need a developer who is going to not just look at everything with the bottom line to create this. And that's it.
Thank you so much, David. I've been waiting years to have this presentation, so it's so fantastic to see what you're doing. I'm going to unplug one computer and plug in the next, and I'll be right with you. Great. Okay. Cautiously optimistic here. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our second speaker for tonight, and that's Michael Sørenson. Michael is design director and partner at Henning Larsen, leading the firm's New York office and numerous civic, cultural, mixed-use, and higher education projects across North America. And these include the Raleigh Civic Tower in North Carolina, Amazon's new Boston office and performing arts center in the Seaport District, the University of Toronto Mississauga's ACT building, the Etobicoke Civic Center in Toronto, and I think we'll hear about tonight the Downsview Framework Plan, which is the largest redevelopment or development underway in North America. A truly global citizen, Michael was born in Australia, raised in South Africa, and returned to Denmark to complete his architectural studies at the Aarhus School of Architecture before joining Henning Larsen in 2006. And he's committed to the context-driven design, the importance of daylight, and a co-creative process defined by research and dialogue to drive innovative, inspiring spaces and places for communities that they serve. His ability to distill complex project parameters and transform them into conceptual drivers is ultimately centered in the belief that, at its core, architecture is about creating spaces that foster human relations. Founded in Copenhagen, with offices worldwide, Henning Larsen is an architectural, landscape architecture, urbanism, an interior, graphic, and lighting design studio. They are curious and work holistically, creating the setting for the transformation of ideas to flourish. So with that, I'd like to introduce and call to the podium Michael Sørenson. Michael. Yes, it should work. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thanks, David. Great work. I don't quite have as many ongoing projects in Toronto, but I'm trying to get after you on that. My name is Michael Sørenson, architect initially from, as you said, been Australia, South Africa. Copenhagen is where I learned a lot about architecture, studied, worked for many years. 4 years ago, I moved to New York, and I run our New York office, where we do projects in Canada and the US. Prior to that, I was traveling extensively over the Atlantic between Copenhagen and Toronto. I've been working in Toronto for the last 7 or 8 years, and we have currently about 7 or 8 projects ongoing in Toronto at the moment. Today I'm going to focus on the Downsview project, which is a huge master plan. It's a redevelopment of the old Bombardier factory that will be is currently being decommissioned, and which of course makes this land available for development moving forward. So the site is a 520-acre site. You can see it outlined in blue and in green. The part where it says the Downsview Park here is not part of the development. That's the existing Downsview Park. And basically the study area we're working on here is the blue area here. And then there's an existing area up here called the Park Commons, where today there is a Centennial College, a hangars where people play sport and so on, a very vibrant, active area for the broader community. The interesting thing about this is it's 2 developers that own the site that have come together to do a joint venture about developing this area. So we are working with a two-headed client. And right now we're working with a framework plan, which means we're working towards a new adoption of a secondary plan for the area. Hopefully that will get adopted here in 2023. And then we'll start to move on and start to look at district plans. So we're basically defining now major street networks, district land use, and the open space network. But of course, to do that, we've been sometimes down in the weeds, bouncing between micro and macro scale constantly to develop this. We are part of a very large team. We are leading the urban design as urban designers, working very closely with urban strategies that are doing the planning, and then with local architects, KPMB, and with a landscape architecture firm from Copenhagen called SLA, and then a plethora of very talented people that really help us understand the context and you could say ground us locally. What's interesting about this project as well is that we won this project just before the onslaught of the pandemic or COVID, and which meant that every single community engagement meeting was online. We've never done that. That's usually on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night in a library somewhere, and maybe 10 people meet up. We went online, which made this available and accessible to hundreds of people to give their voice and their opinion. It also meant, of course, for our team that we really had to pivot our thinking and create a very strong social media presence. So if you Google a Downsview, you can probably go on the website, but you can also see they have a strong presence. And that is part of embedding this in the neighborhood and getting people to engage with us with regards to design. So we've had, I don't have the metrics here, but several hundred community meetings, and that feedback has been implemented constantly in the plan as we've been moving forward. Several guiding principles have come up that are kind of leading the development today. I'll just focus on 6 of them and basically touch on these in the presentation. Of course, we want to create a connected community here. This is going to be something that is developed over time. It'll take many, many years to develop this. So really thinking about how you're going to create these connections over that extensive period. A huge focus on sustainability, resiliency, and green networks. We've coined a phrase together with SLA that we call city nature. I'll come a bit back to this. We are really focused, and that goes for basically all our projects, on people and places. And back to kind of the point David was making, you can build anything, but if you don't support vibrant communities where people can meet each other or interact, you basically have a worthless product. Making something that is accessible for all is very important, and that is something we're really working closely with the community to do. And then honoring the uniqueness of the place. The site, of course, is a former a runway. There are some hangar buildings. There's a few industrial buildings. We're trying to keep as many of these pieces as possible, give them a new life, because they are basically the identity of the site. So through the engagement with the city and some of the discussion, it really came, people came back to us and say they love Downsview Park. It is something that everybody uses on an everyday basis, but of course it's not connected. It's not connected because there's a fence right now around the runway. It's cut off by a rail line that runs right here. So everybody can use this green space, but they can only look at this green space in the background here. So part of our mission is to, try to connect the green space that already exists in Downsview Park with the green spaces that we will be developing over here, and of trying to reuse the runway and redevelop that as a public space. You could say taking something that is a 2-kilometer long a piece of concrete that used to connect people on a global scale, and try to make it and turn it into something now that can connect people at a local scale. Coming back to the nature and the phrase of city nature, we've created an integrated natural system that is fully connected from north to south throughout the site and connects the site east and west, but also connects onto the neighborhoods. It's an important infrastructural piece because it handles all rainwater management on site, but it's also a piece that both supports biodiversity on site. It lets animals travel east and west. They cannot cross roads, they cannot cross railroads. So using nature to kind of help that, and also supporting a huge amenity for the community in the future as well. So basically embedding ourselves, you can kind of see here how the site gets used today. People are hammocking the park, there's fences up, it's really not accessible, all this green area right here. But it does play a pivotal part for the community. You can kind of see the surrounding community here. These are small houses. Everyone has a backyard or a fence or something, but this is kind of their own space. But there's not a lot of common green spaces. They're very small, so people kind of tend to use everything that they can. And trying to learn from the nature that is in the Ontario region, which is essentially high points that feed the water into the ravine system, that in turn feed the water back into the lake, and kind of building in that and saying, well, we have the regional, we're surrounded by the suburban nature of everybody having access to a park, to their own courtyard, and trying to mix those into a new typology that we call city nature. And this typology really talks about connecting both infrastructure and nature as one, so they don't live side by side, but really start to blend with one another. So what we're proposing throughout the plan here is 100 new acres of park. So above and beyond the existing Downsview Park, we are adding 100 new acres here, but not connected as one, but really dispersed throughout the plan. So you kind of see here, as the plan transitions down from north to south, all these bigger parks connected as well, north and south with the runway and with green spaces, but also connecting back with the existing parks in the area here. So you can kind of start to see here how the green network becomes interstitial pieces that connects the site together, east and west, and north and south as well. And this allows us to start to create networks within these that support both people, biodiversity, and so on. So here on the site today, you're standing in the existing Downsview Park. You're looking at the rail track. This is the site in the background. And in the future, what we have proposed, I'm sorry, it's not changing. So the future, we've proposed to transform the landscape, kind of depress the landscape, because we're building at a high point, pressing it down so that we can get the trains to travel across, keeping the same track, but by depressing the landscape, we are creating this important east-west connection. Here it's possible for people to cross. It's possible for rabbits and birds to cross. It's also, we can also pull streets and roads through this. So you're really creating both something that supports the infrastructure on the site, but also supports a certain biodiversity and really is a green amenity for the site as well. And similarly, turning the runway from something that is a 60-meter wide, 2-kilometer long concrete strip into something that in the future can really be part and parcel of connecting the community to one another. So what we are proposing here is a densification of the entire runway. So the eastern part, the eastern facade of the runway is kept linear in the entire length, the 2 kilometers, but the western facade is allowed to bump in and bump out. There are no, you can see here, there are no cars in the street. This is a fully pedestrianized street, but of course it will be crossed as you go through this. In an east-west direction, there will be cars crossing this. And this, we believe, can become a great amenity for all seasons, because this can really be the place where people come together, where schools, children come out and play, where you go in the weekend to skate, and so on. Another aspect of looking at the area today is that you find areas like this. This is the connection to a very new Downsview subway station. You can see this is how people have to get to the subway station. They're making their own tracks through the snow. If you have a bike, you're probably going to get run over. It's basically not very well thought out from an infrastructural standpoint. So trying to make these better connections work and combining those as well with the green infrastructure. So this, for us, and coming from Copenhagen, those of you that know Copenhagen, you know that we own a bike. For us, biking, getting around on foot or by bike is essential to getting around in the city. We really believe that there is a huge possibility in a focus here on pedestrianization and bicycles. Of course, it helps that we are very well connected. You see here Downsview Station to the north, but on the western border of the site, there are 3 or 2 other stations. So the site is essentially very well connected to downtown Toronto. But today, of course, because it's an industrial site, it's very underutilized. So part of the framework plan is, of course, tapping in to the existing road structures that exist in the area and the infrastructure and the regional infrastructure, and getting these important roads to cross east-west on the site, which means also crossing across the GO line, which is the line that runs down in the middle of the site here. So we've worked extensively with our traffic consultants in trying to, again, not only connect the green aspects to the surrounding neighborhood, but also start to connect the road networks back to the existing networks. So of course, if you see on the map today, Downsview is, or the airport is a bit of an anomaly because it steps out of the grid of the city. So here we're trying to mend that with these northwest streets, which become the main drivers, and these 2 east-west streets here that have to go underneath the railway, and these become the main arteries that connect to the regional infrastructure. And then, of course, they will be supported by secondary roads. And further on, as these districts start to come in line and start to be developed, you will have a lot of different roads and networks available. And of course, creating this green infrastructure then allows us to create an alternative network for pedestrians and bicycles that is not on the same network as the street. So you kind of are overlaying 2 different networks onto each other. And then we're looking at creating different intersections across the Barry line, which is this train line that runs across the site. So at 2 points, we will be going underneath the Barry line, and at some points we'll be creating bridges that allow you to, as a pedestrian, to cross over the Barry line. So here again, you're standing on the western side of the site, or sorry, the eastern side of the site. You see here the train track running straight in front of here. What you also see back here is a huge concrete structure. This is the Carl Hall Depot. It's an old military depot. The concrete is made to withstand a nuclear attack. It's a massive structure. What we're proposing, again, is removing a few bays of that, getting the complete street underneath the railroad, and then we're giving new life to this structure here. Already today, in the structure is a beautiful food court, which is a huge, like a very important part of the community. This is where people go on a Saturday morning and buy their groceries, but really giving this the possibility of giving this a new life, of opening up, possibly creating an urban farm or a destination on the roof. So again, creating infrastructure through the site, but also giving the heritage components a new life and a kind of a new identity in the area as well. And also what's important to mention is that employment, this is an area that's defined by a lot of small communities, a lot of small shops. Employment is going to be very essential here. And it was also a very important part of the community feedback we got, that keeping jobs on site, keeping employment in the area is really busy. So this is, of course, important when planning, because in creating any new mixed-use neighborhood, you have to make sure that you both cater for employment and residential. and cultural on the same plan. So today, these are the existing buildings that are on site. These are the old hangar buildings up here, some of the old office buildings, and all of these will be repurposed in the future and be part of the new identity of the site, but they will also be the framework for creating new employment on the site. So again here, just drawing back, you see here the beautiful views there are of Toronto in the background. The airport is on a natural high ridge, so all the water runoff runs to the ravines, and this allows us to create a very unique green infrastructure. But you kind of see here how the areas around it have grown, have been bounded by basically the logic of the airport today. So tying that together now is what we're looking at, and supporting, of course, as I mentioned, a mixed-use community. But the extent of this development and the size of it means that it'll be developed over the next 20 to 30 years. It'll be developed in a number of districts. What we're trying to do here is create districts where you are 15 minutes from your home, you have access to everything that you need. So essentially here you kind of see how the area is being subdivided today into 10 different districts. You can see here the red markers. These are the existing subway lines on site and a GO line as well. So the site is very well connected. In the east down here, these are where the hangars are, and this will be some of the first development areas that will be developed and put online now. And then we'll start developing basically closest to the railway stations, and of course where you can have density to support that development. So again, just standing at the south end of the runway here, and to David's point, and maybe also something that we've learned throughout Europe, in Copenhagen, is that density doesn't always necessarily have to be defined by high-rise. I think it's somewhere is a mix. In the 7 years I've been working in Toronto, I've constantly heard about the missing middle, about the mid-rise. Where is all that? So this is an attempt to create a plan that, of course, in some areas will have high-rise density, but mainly tries to reach the density that is required through mid-rise typologies, which then again allows us to create spaces like this that have access to daylight, have access to sunlight, have access to green spaces, and really start to create a different future and a different approach to urbanity and city planning. So you could imagine standing here in your unit, you're looking out, you're not seeing cars, you're seeing green spaces, your children can play down here, you can bike along the park. This is a different living environment and a different experience than what we know today that is very car-centric. So that, I think, is a future that is very interesting. And then I'd like to lastly, close on showing you another project. And the reason for showing that is now we're working over here in the secondary framework plan on Downsview. We are going to be starting to moving in to the district planning as soon as that's approved. And then as that goes along, you get down into the detailed design of buildings. The reason I want to just discuss this quickly is that it's basically at this level here, the district planning level, that you as an architect and a developer have the opportunity to make the biggest impact on cities. When you get down to buildings, you have a certain impact, but in a district, you have a much bigger impact. So that, for us, is extremely interesting as designers. We're not intent and don't necessarily believe that one architect has to design a whole district. I don't think that's the right thing. But there should always be a plan, a bigger idea about how to develop a district. So just very quickly, this is the district we're currently working on. It's about a 35-acre site. It's in Dublin. This is the center of Dublin here. You see Trinity College, St. Stephen's Park. The area here, this is called the Poolbeg Peninsula, which today is an industrial peninsula. But this really can be a connection between the city and the Bay of Dublin. We were asked to look at the site. It's a development zone. So this is the plan as it looks today. And we were asked to see if we could actually get more density into the site. So we turned it into a plan that looks like this, which, yes, is way more density, but it's going exactly away from what is defined as the grid city, which is maybe made more for the car, for the human being, and then creating a city that is much more made for human beings and for livability. And the basic steps in this was basically by pushing towers around so that they don't block sunlight from each other, maximizing some of the footprints and the exposure. So not just having this grid-like tower and podium, you still have a tower and podium, but the expression of it becomes a lot different. We are situating buildings and massing so that they prevent winds, and that's important because whatever this building does, it will affect the next building and the next building and so on. So this is where you really at a district level can start to have a big impact on the urban plazas and spaces you are creating. This in turn prevents wind funneling. You can guide the wind by doing small changes to the massing. You can really create urban environments that are very beautiful to be in. And then of course, by just rethinking your building mass, maybe not to this kind of expression value, but just rethinking a bit can really break winds and create different kind of climates. In this particular instance, we really work with each single building. So a lot of these are run with computer scripts, defining that each building should have the maximum amount of views from them. So that gives us kind of an overall footprint. We're trying to maximize the amount of daylight we're getting into each unit in the building. And we're trying to create as many spaces at grade that have access to daylight, which means that in these areas here that are green, it's very, very comfortable. In the blue is a bit too much shade, and the yellow is a bit too much overexposure. So you can kind of continue to tweak your building massing so that you create these beautiful urban climates or urban environments. And of course, wind is an important player in that as well, and making sure that you decrease wind speeds by constantly breaking them down. And here you can kind of see some of the metrics that support a very positive urban environment. And of course, a plan like this, although it embeds itself in an overall city plan, it looks very different than the plans that we usually see today. This plan has a green heart or a green road that runs through and connects to the peninsula. It has a more pedestrian heart that connects down to the Bay of Dublin. So this could essentially bring people from downtown down to the Dublin Bay for the very first time. You could actually go down here and swim if you wanted to. And of course, this, again, is an environment that is not focused on cars. It's really focused on people. There's still density. We really acknowledge that. But it's a different kind of living environment that I think a lot of us might understand the importance of now, especially having gone through 2 years of a pandemic. And just at the last slide, kind of showing you what this starts to look like as it, starts to grow out of the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. This is great to see. We're always extremely curious and interested in getting the European perspective, especially the Scandinavian perspective on what we're doing here in North America, well, in Canada in particular. Our last speaker, our third speaker, is Joe Lobko. Joe is an architect and urban designer with 40 years of experience, primarily focused towards community revitalization. In 2006, he joined DITA, Dutoit Alsop, and Hillier as a partner with the merger of his own practice. In the same year, he received Urban Leadership Award from the Canadian Urban Institute and became a fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. In 2020, he received the OAA Randy Roberts Service Award, recognizing his extraordinary service to the profession. And Joe is also the recipient of the 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award from Sustainable Buildings Canada. An advocate for design excellence, Joe has served as the chair of the Toronto Society of Architects and is currently a member of the City of Toronto Design Review Panel. Joe has served as a jury member for many of Canada's most prestigious design awards and acted as the professional advisor for several international design competitions, including the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, the Etobicoke City Centre, Civic Centre, and the Arbor at George Brown College. And Perhaps most relevant to us tonight, Joe is a 1980 graduate of Carleton's Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism, so we're very pleased to welcome Joe back. I think Joe will give us a slightly different perspective on city building, so we welcome him to the podium.
I take those, and I just press this.
That's the
Perfect. Great. Thank you. I'm not going to talk about my work or Deta's work. I'm going to talk more, I guess, as an observer of watching the city of Toronto grow. I'd like to start, though, with a thank you to Ben Gianni and the Carleton School of Architecture for the invitation to participate this evening in this evening's forum on the state of city building. As a Carleton graduate, it's quite special to be invited back here, and it's deeply appreciated. Thanks, Ben, and the school. And thank you also to David O'Malley and his daughter, Yana, who were able to find this apparently rare copy of the opening ceremony poster for the Carleton School of Architecture. 50 years ago, this past September, I was privileged to be part of that first Carleton University class to occupy this very special building. Carleton and Waterloo had added university-level architecture programs in the late 60s as a means of addressing the incredible growth at the time, and to help ensure that the province was adequately provisioned with design talent to take on that challenge. I would suggest that we are in a similar pivot point with respect to the future growth of our province and country. And in the next few minutes, I'd like to describe my view from the perspective of a canary in the coal mine. That is, as a member of the design review panel for the City of Toronto over the past decade of unprecedented growth. As a young parent about 3 decades ago, I have a fond but imperfect memory of the release of Sim City, a city modeling computer game some of you may remember. An early and accessible, even for me, digital glimpse into the increasing complexity of city building as we intensify our urban areas. I recall contemplating the power of that early computer game and what it promised about the future of city planning and the ability of our increasingly digital world to help us to figure out how best to direct the future shape of our cities. I was very much inspired by that promise. Are we there yet? Is SimCity a reality? Based on my own brief review on this topic, the short answer is no. But there are some very encouraging glimpses of what is hopefully about to become possible that are emerging. And I think we got a little bit of a glimpse of that in Michael's presentation just now, in that project in Dublin. After a few months of scratching the itch of a professional curiosity about where we are in this topic, I would like to share with you my recent adventure to discover just how are we doing in the effort to build smarter cities. Courtesy of the RLB Crane Index, a measure of the number of active cranes in the skylines of North American cities where their firm is active, includes New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, Seattle. As you can see from this relatively recent graphic, the Greater Toronto Area has more active cranes on its skyline, 225 as of the third quarter of 2021. I appreciate some inflation's happening at the moment, but more than the combined totals of all of those other key and active North American cities, and our rate of growth has been increasing. This view of downtown Toronto's core in 2006 has been provided by the Graphics and Visualization Department of Urban Design within the City of Toronto Planning every year for many years now to provide everyone with a sense of how rapidly our city is growing. So that's 15 years. 15 years later, from the same perspective, the increasing pace of development is so great that it becomes very challenging to keep up with development review and approval, let alone the need to continually evolve planning and development frameworks to meet this ever-increasing challenge. The Greater Toronto population is projected to increase by just under 3 million people, or about 40%, from 7 million in 2020 to almost 10 million by 2046. That amounts to about 100 new 25-story towers per year for the next 25 years. Not suggesting they will be delivered in that form, just to put a visual to it, that's what it kind of represents. And twice that many, 200 towers a year for 25 years of that scale in the 5 cities surrounding Toronto. So how well are we doing at mapping and visualizing the capacity and potential of our future cities to prepare us for this ongoing phenomenon? An aerial photo of the Scarborough Town Centre on the left. The image on the right is a 3D digital model of the same terrain, but with the addition of projects approved or under construction, a basic digital twin intended to assist with imagining the future of this place. Design happens within a context and is deeply influenced by the way we draw and visualize during that design process, which includes what we draw. As architects, we know that what we draw and view during the course of a design process has a direct bearing on the outcome of that process. If we exclude things from our considerations and visualizations, then those things inevitably are not reflected in our final design proposals. Thus it is with cities as well. The current rapid development and transformation of our cities is our most important collective design project. We need to ensure that our decision makers across the spectrum of influence and responsibility have the best information available as they contemplate our choices. Other than specific and relatively limited exercises like the one on the screen, the one Michael just presented at Downsview, why are we not drawing how each and every neighborhood in our city might accommodate their own share of the growth coming our way? At the moment, despite the heroic efforts of some very hardworking and creative people within our public service and many in the private sector, I sense that we still have a long way to go in order to adequately understand the capacity of our cities to accept the continuing growth coming our way, let alone to shape it in a sustainable and meaningful way for generations to come. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. TO Core, the document intended to paint the picture of the immediate future of Toronto's core, has a lot of words and some helpful pictures, but there are none that I could find that describe the physical, three-dimensional built form of the future anticipated. Despite substantial effort, city planning is often in a reaction mode with respect to the physical form and infrastructure implications of our growth. Innovations in digital technology can perhaps help us understand and manage this situation much more effectively than is currently the case. A couple of quotes to help set the stage for this exploration. Once we are able to link a location with a piece of digital information, data, the world of mapping and visualization changed forever, and the concept of smart cities emerged. Location is the grammar of smart cities. So says Alison Brooks, who provides this quote to help explain how leading cities are using location technology and data-driven decision-making to make their communities safer, smarter, and more economically resilient. The second is a quote from Yuval Noah Harari, historian and author, in his book titled 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He who owns the data owns the future. Suggests how critical the topic of the ownership of data has become and the essential role that government has to play in the data explosion currently underway. Open data holds the key to our collective ability to better understand our rapidly changing cities. The City of Toronto has an open data portal available in an accessible format since 2019, which likely represents one of the most advanced approaches to the sharing of data critical to the governance of cities in the country thus far. Though in speaking to Stephen earlier this evening, I'm not so sure anymore. It is in the development of open data and the commitments of governments towards transparency around decision-making and accessibility to public data, together with developments in digital mapping tools, that enables us to link data with ever-evolving forms of visualizations, an important innovation to support decision makers and engage community members moving forward. Open data is digital data that is made available with the technical and legal characteristics for it to be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, anytime, anywhere. There are now 500 data sets, or over 500 data sets available on the City of Toronto's Open Data Portal, covering a wide array of topics selected to reflect community priorities. This number is constantly growing every week as the city continues to develop its approach to open data. The best, most reliable data attributes typically come from government sources, and reliability matters a lot when dealing with public policy and governance. How do we balance private versus public control of data? How should smart data be governed? What type of data should be collected? What should be off limits? How do we balance data protection with data access? How do we balance privacy with public interests? How can cities set policy without access to data? Might municipalities encounter future data deficits in developing public policy? One of those data sets is city planning's 3D massing model, a pretty critical data set to develop, and while the job is well underway, it has a long way to go. The group responsible for this work has not had a significant staff increase in 2 decades, notwithstanding the incredible pace of development, the onset of open data, and the increasingly evident value in the work that this group does on our collective behalf. This existing 3D digital model only covers a small portion of the City of Toronto, the portion currently under active development pressure. It is not yet embedded with data attributes, nor does it reflect the significant topography of our city. The model is now updated with the 3D digital models of all new building permits as they become available. But this does not address the much larger number of existing buildings and places which are yet to be modeled. This has to change. Public investment in this effort is well behind and critical to ensuring that reliable data linked to location becomes available to decision makers going forward. I've come to understand this as a collective effort, engaging an ever-increasing pool of people with the interest, skill, and resources to help contribute to the growing accumulation of data describing the form and character of our existing and evolving city. Our company history has been about digitizing the geography of the world. Once you have a digital map, you're no longer limited to a globe or an atlas or a paper map. You have a digital model of the world. At that point, you can add layers of data to the map and understand far more. This quote from the Esri President of Canada, Alex Miller, helps us understand the mission of their company and their critical role in underpinning and providing support to major government and private sector clients, providing tools to allow for the creative visualization of the increasing volume of data that is emerging and to organize it in a way that is legible and useful. McKinsey has found that smart city technologies can reduce fatalities by 8 to 10%, accelerate emergency response times by 20 to 35%, cut the average commute by 15 to 20%, lower the disease burden by 8 to 15%, and cut greenhouse gas emissions by 10 to 15%. 4 key pillars of a smart city, according to some people at Esri: achieving operational efficiencies, leveraging data streams from the Internet of Things to influence data-driven performance, not ideological-driven performance, engaging with communities from the start to enable more accessible forms of civic inclusion. This, to me, is one of the most important potentials of smart city technology, and that is better, not worse engagement, more informed engagement, a more informed populace. The visualization on the screen illustrates annual pedestrian injuries in San Francisco, coordinating information about both location, timing, and frequency to assist those responsible for reducing the scope of the problem. As a long-range urban planner for the City of Toronto, Scott Edmondson thinks a lot about the fact that at its current pace of growth, San Francisco will approach the limits of existing zoning and anticipated capacity sometime around mid-century. What happens then? And this for a city where the zoning and planning framework is intended to reflect the actual growth desired. In a place like Toronto, the existing zoning and planning framework has proven not to be a reliable forecaster of growth and community capacity. So how do we collectively better understand our capacity for growth and intensification? We've barely begun to scratch the surface of this critical question. We have a major challenge in transitioning from a paper to a digital world with respect to our existing built environment. Most building owners have avoided the task thus far, leaving us with vast data gaps. The technology now exists to easily create digital twins efficiently, but this still represents an enormous effort. Who has the incentive or financial capacity to take this on? It's likely a government responsibility at the end of the day, unless someone in the private sector can find a way to monetize the digitization of all that data. But in that scenario, who owns and controls that data? Let us look at some tools developed a bit closer to home. Ratio City is a Toronto-based software innovator providing digital tools to help city builders make decisions faster. Founded in 2017 by architect Monica Jarozenik, with a background focused on large-scale redevelopment projects. By the way, David, working with Peter. And software developer Aaron Morrow, with a background in engineering and the modeling of large-scale pedestrian movements around major transit hubs. Ratio City provides access to a three-dimensional digital mapping platform with access to over 400 data sets across 12 cities, and those numbers are growing. Ratio City view themselves as curators of data and stewards of a data marketplace. Their software integrates planning and zoning policy together with a basic 3D massing tool, enabling quick thumbnail analysis of the development potential of a specific site, providing a broad array of data outputs, including unit counts, average floor plate sizes, parking statistics, as well as pro forma financial analysis, including projections on land value depending on the inputs provided. Their tool can be used to help identify and quantify the extent of city land available and designated for growth as defined by current policy. Using three main parameters for development potential within the City of Toronto, they were able to determine that only about 12% of available City of Toronto land area has policy permissions consistent with growth criteria. This kind of data production and visualization is very valuable in considering the choices before us. A remarkably useful tool. In this next portion of the presentation, I'd like to share some of the visualizations City of Toronto staff have been developing in an effort to help us better understand the nature of our evolving city. In this case, a graphic illustrating the location, stage, and scale of new residential development applications across the city, somewhat supporting David's earlier observation about the inner suburbs starting to be a place with a lot more pressure. A City of Toronto heat map on the right depicting population change in the downtown core till 2041, with a map generated by the Parks Department on the left focusing upon the changing ratio of available park space for individual residents on a per capita basis as neighborhoods intensify. A map helping to visualize those parts of the city with reduced park area per person. The orange and yellow areas depicted here. An example of the way in which we can communicate aggregated data into clear and meaningful graphic communications, enabling wide access of the information to the broader community. And as often is the case, one map can lead to another. The prior map, in effect, leads to this one, illustrating the acquisition priorities for the Parks Department to help meet the need of park space in those areas of the city experiencing the most growth and most underserved with publicly accessible green space. This interactive tool allows residents to understand and compare existing and proposed transit nodes across the city with respect to existing and proposed residential and employment populations and targets. In this case, my own neighborhood, located close to the Broadway subway station, is projected to double in population. But there are no visualizations provided to the link to link this type of prediction with an illustration to show just how this would look and function, or what options might exist that we ought to consider as a community. Absent visualizations connected to data, we are left wondering how all of this will be accomplished. I love this graphically strong mapping of utilization rates for elementary schools between 2019 and those projected in 2029. Note the increase in green in the diagram on the right, i.e., lower utilization rates for much of the city in 2029, despite the continuing rapid increase in overall population projected. This is an effective graphic means by which to communicate that growth is happening in some places and not others, suggesting a number of considerations related to required infrastructure going forward. This recent visualization produced by City of Toronto Planning is intended to help residents understand the potential of intensification in existing neighborhoods. While helpful and encouraging, these explorations do not actually come with metrics, i.e. data, to help us understand the potential impacts of this form of gentle intensification. Rather than the hypothetical locations described in these illustrations, why are we not taking on this challenge in real existing physical terms with specific data outputs neighborhood by neighborhood across every city and town in Ontario? This GPS data image, I've only got a couple more, everyone. This GPS data image reflects the respective cost of development to the taxpayer between dense, walkable, transit-friendly neighborhoods and those that are more suburban, low density, and car dependent. Based on their work, this group called Urban 3, based in Asheville, North Carolina, based on their work, the most expensive and unaffordable form of development by far is the form now proposed by our current provincial government to address our increasing affordability crisis. The expansion of low-density traditional forms of single-family housing now proposed into the Greenbelt surrounding Toronto is the most expensive and unsustainable way to possibly grow on the planet. Visualizations like this one can help bring that data and those facts to life. I'd like to briefly share an open letter to the Government of Ontario regarding the recently approved Bill 23 and the sense from an established group of leading Toronto-based design and planning firms, my own included, about the outcomes likely from this new legislation. What the current provincial government is proposing is unnecessary and illogical, requiring ongoing taxpayer subsidy to support private development interests for generations to come, while exacerbating our climate crisis. This bill will reduce rather than increase the supply of affordable housing. Public participation in outcomes is expressly discouraged. It will undermine local democracy. Critical environmental protections will be removed. The GTA's Greenbelt and protection of the most valuable food-producing land in the country will be critically undermined. Design considerations will be removed from consideration of planning approval going forward. This is just about the worst way forward, I might imagine, in a province that I think you've seen some evidence of, has developed an impressive capacity to deliver high-quality, dense, sustainable urban environments. We can do much better than the anything goes, race to the bottom that the current government seems to be promoting. I was recently invited to attend a thought-provoking evening at the Art Gallery of Ontario, partially organized by another Carleton graduate, Vancouver-based Gregory Enriquez, whose practice for me epitomizes the very best aspirations of our profession. Gregory was recently invited by the UN Refugee Organization to assist them in helping to articulate the extent of the world's displaced person challenge and in suggesting solutions. That informative evening highlighted for me these sobering statistics and the rate of rise over the past decade. Just check out the last 10 years. As the son of a displaced person from World War II, whose Ukrainian father was not allowed into Canada until 1947, 2 years after war's end, when our government decided that its then labor shortage was dire enough to even allow Ukrainian DPs into the country, I find these numbers staggering. If not Canada, where? Are we up to this just now? Nowhere close at the moment, perhaps, but we could be. Our country ought to be able to welcome a good number of the displaced families out in the world just now, looking for a place to land. And in my view, we certainly have the capacity, the wealth, and the intelligence to make this happen in a smart way if we invest in that challenge. Last slide. The respected Institute for Higher Business Studies, based in Barcelona, publishes an annual Cities in Motion ranking, intended to provide a measure of a city's progress in employing emerging smart city tools across a broad range of criteria identified to measure the overall effectiveness of local governance. I should have brought that bottle of water up, sorry. Of that selected group of 130 cities, their 2022 ranking placed Toronto at 30th overall, with Vancouver at 44th. I'll be fine, Ben, thank you. The ranking suggests that these two cities do well at urban planning and the economy, okay with social cohesion, governance, and international outreach, but less well at mobility, transportation, and the environment. Given our ongoing intensity of growth and the province that our country offers the world for ongoing migration, Canadian cities should be doing much better. I look forward optimistically to how these emerging tools are going to continue to evolve to help us better understand and then shape the future form and character of our rapidly growing cities. And most particularly, how they might help us better understand this challenge of community capacity. I found a small group of Canadian professionals who were good enough to share some of their valuable time to help me better understand this emerging digital world to be inspiring. They certainly have the skill sets and forward-looking, positive spirit to help move us along. I can't wait to see where they go next. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a really fantastic counterpoint. Start the evening talking about how growth is such an amazing opportunity, and end the evening thinking about how growth is such an amazing challenge. So we really have to look at the two together, and it really, I think, again, especially to the students in this room, suggests the kinds of opportunities and challenges that they face going forward. Well, we had identified tonight as a conversation. I think it's, I think we're out of time, to be honest with you. It's about 20 to 8 already, and so I'm not sure exactly how appropriate it would be to keep you here longer with the conversation. But I would like to thank so much everyone for coming, and so much our speakers, Joe Lobko, Michael Sørenson, and David Wex, for giving us a snapshot into what's going on in Canadian cities and to help us position ourselves as architects, urban designers, and designers generally in this again, a combined challenge and opportunity. So with that, I'd like to, I guess, say goodnight to everyone and hang around, and we'll talk informally, and to remind you to look for us again in the forum again in January, where we're pleased to host a conversation on Canadian housing and Canadians' Indigenous population. So good night, everyone. Thank you.